pick something kind of in the middle. So we'll look at each of the parts of one of the lessons in Burlington Core today. So essentially, when you click on one of those levels, you're going to get 7 parts. And the reason we made it this way is really just based on feedback from teachers. So we had feedback from teachers over the years that they want everything to be all in one place. So this is the answer to that. We've got lesson plans, the in-class lessons, which you will project in a face-to-face classroom or in a virtual classroom. You can just share on your screen. There are worksheets that go along with those in-class lessons. And then these bottom 4 portions are what students will see when they sign in. So teachers get an extra 3 parts for teaching their classes. But when students sign in, they're just going to see their own independent lessons, a section for them to practice their vocabulary, a writing portfolio, and then a section to check their progress. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the course and lesson planner first. And just remember, as I'm going through with this, you can reach out to me at any point to ask for this information again. There's a lot in here, and I'm happy to help you with any of it. I'm going to open up a placement chart so you can get a peek at that first. This has the Burlington Core levels as far as classes, best, and TABE Class E. So this will show you where to place students in those different levels. So first we've got that classes score, the best, and then TABE Class E over there on the very right. So the level we're looking at today is for high beginning. So these are those scores that we would be looking at for CASAS, best, and then TABE. Okay, I'm also going to open up this scope and sequence document because it's a really handy way to see an overview of this entire course. So this course has 10 different modules, which basically just means unit. Apparently we use module for something that's online and unit for something that's paper, which is something I learned a month ago. Each of those individual modules or units is going to have 8 different lessons in them. So they're always going to start out with a listening and speaking lesson, then go on to grammar, then reading, then grammar, then a video, grammar, and then a life skills lesson, and then it'll always end with a writing lesson. So that writing students do in that final lesson is what's going to go into their portfolio for their teachers to make comments on. And all of the other lessons really build up to that writing assignment. I'm going to close out of that here. And then I'm just going to scroll down to this part that says lesson plans, and we can pick one to look at together. So go ahead, type in the chat which of these different modules you would like to look at, whether it's, let's choose one from 2 through 10, because I've looked at the first one quite enough times, and I'm trying to make myself learn all parts of this curriculum. So go ahead if you've got a topic that's interesting to you, go ahead, type that number in the chat, whether it's, you could type 2 for education, 3 for getting a job. Okay, I'm hearing some 5, money matters. Okay, I see 2 for money, so I'm going to go into money matters. And then if you want to look at any of these other lessons, just let me know. We can give you demo login info to check these out. So let's see. I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to open up lesson number 5. This is a watch and speak activity. And I'm going to open up this lesson plan here. And then I just want to check real quick too with Kim, can you confirm if I play sound on my computer, will they be able to hear the sound I play through GoToMeeting?
No.
No. Okay. I'm not going to do a lesson. No problem. I'm going to do a reading lesson instead. We'll learn about tipping. Good thing to confirm before we open up a video. All right. So each lesson plan is 3 pages long. The first thing we see is an overview of the lesson. And then the second part here, to pace the lesson, we estimate that the lesson takes about 90 minutes to pace. And there's an extra hour's worth of expansion activities that you can use if you want. So each lesson has about 2.5 hours worth of content. And then just remember, there's 80 different lessons in these different courses. So lots and lots and lots of content. And that's just the teacher portion. When we get into the student section here, that's when they're going to be able to do their homework. So that's where you'll see those, it's 60 minutes about is how long it'll take students to do their own portion. And then we've got all of the correlations in the lesson plan. So one thing that I have really liked about CORE is they really started from a blank sheet of paper when they wrote this. So they looked, number one, at what teachers wanted and what their feedback was from the old version of Burlington. And then they looked at the standards and they wrote something that directly is aligned to those standards, which, you know, if you were like me before something like this, I was just kind of trying to retrofit the standards on what I was teaching. This is different. This is really clearly written directly to the standards that we need. I'm going to go down next. Oops, sorry, I have a little trouble scrolling here. The second page of the lesson plan is where it's going to actually start to break down the lesson. So this, for me, was really golden because I'm a newer teacher. So I don't mind having someone hold my hand and helping me through, you know, all of the steps of the lesson. For folks who are more experienced, you can probably just skim over these to get an idea of what's in the lesson. You can add your own teacher magic, you know, to these activities. But for me, this is where it was at, because I usually had 10 minutes to prepare. And during that time, I had 5 different students telling me about their weekends. So my warm-up activity that I'm going to do, they say before opening the ICL. So that just stands for in-class lesson. That's my projectable lesson. They want us to write some sentences on the board and have students unscramble the sentences and write them in the correct order. So a lot of times these will relate back, you know, to the lesson you taught the previous day. And you can sub in your own warm-up too if you have a different idea. But what's nice about this is you don't have to reinvent the wheel or create something new each time. Okay, this next section of our lesson is where we're actually going to start using that ICL activity, that in-class lesson. So there are 2 activities we're going to do. We're going to write the name of the lesson on the board, introduce the topic and objectives. And then the second thing we're going to do is elicit students' prior knowledge of the lesson topic and start introducing vocabulary. So I'm just heading right back over to Burlington English here. And remember I said everything's all in one place, all easy to access. In the upper right corner, there's 3 little dots, this little switch. If I click on it, this lets me get to any other place in the course. So I'm going to go ahead next and click on in-class lessons so we can follow along with the lesson plan we're looking at. We are in money and we're looking at the lesson on tipping. So if I were teaching this in my class, this would be what I would plug in and hook up to the projector so I can, you know, project it on my whiteboard or smartboard. In a virtual environment, you really can just share your screen and walk through these same pages with your students. You can see up along the top, I've got pages 1 through 11. These are going to match up with that lesson plan and the activities in there. A couple of other things I'll point out in these in-class lessons, we've got accessibility settings. So down in the lower left corner, I can do things like change the screen contrast for students with different, vision issues. And this is available in the student lessons too. Another thing that's really awesome about having a curriculum that's fully online is I can zoom in really, really tight. So if I have students who are on their phones or they're telling me they can't see, I can really, really zoom in super close to anything that I need to make it easier for students to see. Okay. So to follow along with our lesson plan, the first thing we're doing with our class is we're being clear with them what this lesson is about. We're working with adult students. We want to be really explicit and say, this is what you're going to walk away from in this lesson. You will identify claims. You'll support those claims with reasons. You'll identify quotations, and you're going to use adjectives with the prefix un. Okay. Our next page of our Get Ready activity is where we're starting to elicit that prior knowledge. So a couple of handy things in these lessons that you'll see sprinkled throughout. Whenever you see this little teacher with the pointer, that means there's a teaching tip in there. So those are just sprinkled throughout the lessons to help you with some different points. Here they're telling us a tip is extra money that customers give to workers who serve them. So some of these, are more about American culture. Some of them are other kinds of teaching tips, but I have found them all really helpful. Another thing you'll see where it has these numbers 1, 2, 3 is numeracy tips. So we're in a money lesson. Of course, there's going to be a numeracy tip. There are also digital literacy tips sprinkled throughout the lessons. In the lower levels, you'll see some phonics tips. So here I can click on this numeracy tip and get information about tips and how to calculate those tips, which I'm sure you know as your educators yourselves, that could take a whole lesson right there. That could take all day. Here we've got a photo, and I can ask my students, who is the tip for? Who put it there? What other workers get tips in the US? And we can start discussing these questions. I've got buttons in the bottom right that I can use to show an answer or to show all of the answers. I can reset. So you can choose whether you want to type. I could say the tip is for the server, or whether you want to use these buttons to type or to show those answers rather. Okay, so that's just the introduction to the lesson here. Next, when we start getting into the lesson a bit more, we're going to do a vocabulary activity. So they're going to have us teach some vocabulary to the lesson or to the students. And anytime I see this little red symbol, that means there's a worksheet that goes along with that part. So I'm going to hop right back into the lesson here. And I can see I've got some sentences. My vocabulary words are bolded. So this is what I really want to teach to my students. And I can do each of these questions and activities with my students, whether in person or in a virtual environment. And as I'm doing these things, I am demonstrating digital literacy skills in a really contextualized way for students. So I can be really clear that here I have to click to answer the question. Or, oh, do you know there's 2 pages here? Where do I go to see the extra page? It's this arrow on the bottom of the screen. Then I can get to page 2 to see other questions. So being able to teach students those digital literacy skills in your own lesson is really going to help them when they're doing work independently. And then again, I'm seeing that little red symbol telling me there's a worksheet that goes along with this lesson or this part of the lesson. So to get to the worksheets, I can use my same little 3 dots in the upper right corner to get to any part of the lesson. So here, I'm just going to click right onto the worksheets page. And it's actually pretty slick. It puts a box right around the worksheet that I need. So it knows I came from that vocabulary page about tipping. This is the list of all of the vocabulary words. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. Anytime we're introducing new vocabulary, we're providing a list, and this is really in order to maximize the time your students spend writing. So they're not just copying down the vocabulary for the lesson, but you're having them do something with that vocabulary, whether it's a spelling game or writing them in a sentence or definitions or translations or whatever other activities you like to do to introduce vocabulary. This way your students don't have to write out the list, or you don't have to type up a list. Another thing I'll point out while we're here in the worksheet section that's pretty handy is if you click on this little document that has the, what's it called? Magnifying glass. I was going to say megaphone, that's not right. The document that has the magnifying glass on it, that will let you view and print everything that's in a particular module. So if I want to give my students a packet of worksheets, I can do this really easily. When this loads up, it's going to give me all of the worksheets that are in that unit, and it gives it a cover page so it looks like a nice little packet. And then these are just going to be all of the different worksheets for all of the lessons in that unit. So if you have folks who you're teaching at a distance who like doing things like worksheets, if that's something you enjoy teaching with, you can definitely print these out in a packet form and give them to your students. You can also download them and email them to your students, but I like the printed copy myself. And you can print out all of them if you click on this button in the very, very top bar. I'm not going to print on that or click on that though, because it's over 200 pages and it takes forever to load. So I'm going to go back into my in-class lesson. So we just came from the worksheets page. We looked at the worksheet that goes along with this vocabulary. And I'm just going to scroll through the other vocabulary page so you can see here we're doing some typing. We're answering these questions. The next section of our lesson is going to be a reading activity. So we're going to have students read an article, and then we're going to check their comprehension. And they're telling us again, there's a worksheet that goes along with this. So the worksheet is the same as the reading in our lesson. So I'm going to go back to our lesson here. This is the reading activity. I can click play and we can listen to it, so not in GoToMeeting. I can use this little plus symbol to make it fit on the full screen, you know, and help my students see it a bit better. I've got a teaching point about claims, and we're going to use our critical thinking skill of analyzing. So we're going to analyze this article and find out what claim does this writer make. On the next page, we'll have the same reading activity, but we're going to be looking for different information. So next, we're going to finish reading the article and answer these different questions. Again, we've got a teacher's tip about reasons that writers often give reasons to show why their claim is true. And again, the next page, we've got the same reading, but now we're looking for quotations. So we're taking you through those different steps to break down this reading with your students. On our last page, we're going to read the claims and reasons and match the reasons that support each claim. So this is another one of those examples of a time that you can really easily demonstrate digital literacy skills to your students. So here you can teach them how to drag and drop while you're answering these questions. You know, I'm using my mouse. You can hold up your mouse. I'm holding down this button. You can show them the steps for dragging and dropping there. All right. The next portion of the teacher lesson is a vocabulary focus, and then we're going to end with a review game. So I'm popping right back into that in-class lesson. Here we're practicing with our prefix and how it gives adjectives the opposite meanings. So we're going to complete this chart with these other words. Again, there is a worksheet that goes along with this part. So I'm not going to hop over there now, but it's going to be the same as this chart, basically. So you can either have students take that worksheet and fill in the answers, or you can just do this part on your screen, the in-class lesson, or you can do both of those things. There's flexibility in there for you. Okay, our next page here, we're using our critical thinking skill to interpret, and we're looking at these photos to fill in the blanks of these sentences. And these are all vocabulary words that we're practicing. So what I really like about these things is you don't have to try to Google 100 different pictures to fit your vocabulary list. The pictures, the video, the reading, it's all here for you in one kind of neat package. And then the last part of our lesson is a review game. So there's different games at the ends of different lessons. This tic-tac-toe one I haven't played much, but you can break your team up or your class up. So you've got your team X and your team O. They can choose where they want their letter to go. And then they've got a question to answer about it. So if they get their answer correct, it gives you a happy little ding sound, and then it gives you the points. And then the next team gets to go. So these are really fun ways to review the vocabulary, the activities that you learned in this lesson. It's a great way to finish out a class. My students were really competitive in these games. They would get so noisy. I would have other teachers poking their heads in to say, what is going on? I would play the games every Wednesday, and I swear my students were learning English just to beat the games some days because they were so fun. Okay, so that's the main part of the lesson, that 90-minute section of the lesson. So next we can look at the expansion activities in this lesson. So they give us an expansion worksheet that we can use and then an additional activity. So I'm just going to pull up that worksheet so we can see what that looks like. Again, I'm using my little 3 dots to get to the worksheet section. Here's my expansion activity. And this one is basically having students ask 2 people in the class about tipping in the country where they're from. So of course, nice to break up folks into different groups to practice this kind of activity. In a virtual environment, you know, you can always adapt this by having students in breakout rooms or having students exchange numbers and call each other to discuss these different questions and come back to the next class. I'm going to go ahead and close that guy. And then back into my lesson plan. So that expansion worksheet about tipping and their classmates, and then tipping in the US. And then the additional activity, to tip or not to tip, we're going to create a chart and organize information, some reasons that tipping is unfair, and reasons to tip. The last part of our lesson plan is going to start breaking down what's going to go on in the student lesson here. So that's the part we'll look into next, what the students are going to be doing after you teach. I'm going to close that lesson plan here. Oops, there we go. Got multiple things open. And I'm going to use those little 3 dots to switch right over to the student lessons. And then I'll just pause real quick. Are there any questions, Angela, that we can answer, or are you all set?
No,
Okay.
there really isn't. Becky just shared a really
Good.
nice comment about how, well, can you read it?
Oh yeah, I can see, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
She's grateful
Okay.
that that during COVID they had the ability to use the program because it really saved decreased the stress in planning for virtual
Perfect.
lessons.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Becky. That always helps us to know. I mean, like Angela and I both coming from the classroom, we really always miss students and hearing about the classroom because that's still the end goal. That's what we care about.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps us to hear that. All right, so the student lessons, you can see they look really similar to the teacher lessons. I'm going to open up the tipping lesson so we can see what students are going to do after we've taught that lesson in class. These student lessons are really meant to reinforce what the teacher teaches. And one really nice thing about the new Burlington is that all of the lessons that we have online are able to fit fully on mobile. So the students can do these student lessons, just with the app from their iPhone store or the Google Play Store. They can download the app onto their phone, it's free, and they can do these same lessons. A couple of other things I'll point out here in the student lessons are they've got the same basic pages that the teacher has. So they're going to do the same thing that the teacher did. They're going to follow along with each of these pages. They've got similar images. They've got the same vocabulary we talked about in our lesson, but they're doing some different activities with it. So it's really going to help, form that path in their brain that helps them remember the content if what they're doing outside of class is matching what their teacher taught them in class, to make it really, really cohesive. One thing I'll point out here too is when I answer these questions, I can click check to get my score, and then it's going to show my percentage score in the lower left corner. I can see I got 100 out of 100 on this activity. In the upper right corner where it says 20%, that's showing me how complete this lesson is. So I've done these first 2 pages, it's saying I'm about 20% done. I'm going to go on to this next page, the vocabulary section in this lesson. So for each of these vocabulary words, students are going to be able to listen to the word, and then they'll click on record to record their voice saying the word. The next thing they can do is they can see a translation of the word. So if they click on this little globe right here, it'll show the translation of the vocabulary into whatever their first language is. So whatever language you select when you create their account. Another really cool thing on this page is if you print out the vocabulary page, you actually get a list of all of the vocabulary in English and then in the translation language. So this can be really, really helpful for students learning new vocab. They can print it out right from their own lesson to have all of those full lists. Okay. The other part that students can see a translation of is the instructions. So on any page where we've got these instructions in English, students can click on this globe in the very upper right right by my name to change the language for my instructions. So there I've got my instructions in Spanish, but of course we've got many, many languages for you to choose from. When students are practicing this vocabulary, they're pronouncing this word and they're getting instant feedback on what that pronunciation is. Another thing that's really, really cool about this vocabulary is that when students are pronouncing this, it's feeding into the Burlington English speech trainer system. So this basically works. If you imagine a test tube for every sound in the English language, whenever your student mispronounces a sound or they make a mistake, it'll put a drop in that test tube. So when that test tube gets full, when your student has made that same mistake enough times, it'll give them a targeted pronunciation course for whatever their speech issue is. And that's another button right here up in the upper right. When that course is ready for them, it's going to start flashing. So I'm going to click on that so you can see what that looks like. So I know you can't hear very well what's going on through GoToMeeting, but they can essentially listen to the teacher voice, the trainer voice, and their voice and compare those two sounds. This student is struggling with the H sound, so they can start listening to the differences. The next section is where they're actually going to get a speech trainer that's going to show them how do you move your mouth and lips to pronounce the sound, to make the sound happen. So she's telling them how to do that, to produce that H sound. The third section is where they're going to listen to that sound and they're going to start hearing it, you know, and choosing, did I hear hedge or did I hear edge? And then the fourth section is going to be them practicing pronouncing that sound. I'm going to close that guy there. But that is a super, super neat, handy thing for students to work on their speaking and pronunciation. It's really targeted to whatever their exact issues are. And they can also star these vocabulary words if they want them to come up more for them, you know, in games, if they want to add them to their own personal list. There's about 100 million things I could tell you about the vocabulary section. There's a lot in there. Next, as they're going through the lesson, they're doing some more practice dragging and dropping with these vocabulary words. Putting these vocabulary words in sentences here. In the reading section, they've got the same reading you did in class. So this is going to feel, you know, really cohesive for them, that they can see exactly the same reading my teacher taught, but I'm going to be reading for different information and answering different questions about it. There's some highlighting and erasing tools they can use with this reading. Again, more questions about that exact reading activity, and then they're going to get into that vocabulary focus section, just like the teacher did with some of those longer words or sometimes phrases that they're going to be practicing. Okay, so that is one student lesson of many that we looked at that goes along with the one we taught in class. So I'm going to use my little 3 dots here to get into the progress section next. I really like the progress section. So this is where, you know, previously when we talked about using data to drive our instruction, this is where you can really do that. So I can see my class. These are fake students, so don't worry about that. I can see my class and all of their time, whether that time was at school or whether that time was away from school. I can see their scores and how complete each lesson is. And then I can actually run different filters. So for example, if I wanted to just look at what did my students do last week? Let's run a filter and see who did this grammar lesson I taught last week. I wonder who scored under 70. I can apply that kind of a filter and see really quickly, okay, 22 out of my 52 students, they scored less than 70% on that lesson. So that means I should really find another way to teach that grammar. We should definitely come back to it next week. We should really spend some more time on that point, because that's, you know, half of my class that isn't getting a very great score on my grammar activity. You can also search by different hours if you want to see who did more than 2 hours this week or who did less. You can do that. You can search lots of different info in there. You can export this to Excel. And then I'm going to click on this little individual person. So this is actually my progress in Burlington Core. And this is also what it looks like for students. So right now I'm not looking at the class, I'm looking at individual progress. So when a student clicks on their progress screen, this is what it's going to look like. If I looked at that same lesson I was just looking at on tipping, I can see, oh, I did 20% of that lesson. I really only completed the first 2 pages. Those 2 that are dark blue are complete. And that 3rd, 4th, 5th page, I didn't do any of those. So I can click right on page 3, and it's actually going to zoom me right back into the student lessons from there. So that's also a really handy thing to teach your students, you know, to go in and check their progress and let them know that you can see their progress too. So they can get right back into those lessons and connect all those dots. All right, I'm going to use my little switch here to get into the vocabulary practice section. So this is exactly what it sounds like. This is extra practice for the vocabulary words that are introduced in each lesson. So you can see it brought me right to the one on tipping. So I can select this lesson. You might notice that it says like number 1, number 3. That's because lesson number 2 is a grammar lesson, so it doesn't introduce new vocabulary. But if I want to look at the vocabulary that goes along with my tipping lesson, I can look here. For each word, I can listen to it and then pronounce it. I can see the translation. I can also listen to it and then pronounce it in a sentence. So they take each of those vocabulary words one step further and put them in a sentence. Then I can go next and practice more of my vocabulary. The next thing we do, if I click on this little X to close out of this page, is I can use this little orange button in the bottom right corner to open up some different activities to do with my vocabulary. So if I want more practice with these are all different games I can use. Memory games, spelling games, word searching, matching, all different activities and games. Here it's listening and matching up to the vocabulary. And you can use these in class, or your students can use them independently. It's really up to you. The last section here is the portfolio. So I'm going to open that part up here. And this is where all of your students' writing is going to go. So I'm looking at my portfolio. So I've just been typing in this to play around with it. But essentially, when students do that 8th lesson in the unit, they're going to have a writing activity. All of the lesson is going to build up and scaffold to get them ready for this writing activity. And then they're going to have some tips along to the right side. They're also going to have a model of writing they can look at. So if I click on this little model, it'll open up a sample that I can use to guide my own writing. I can move it over if I want to have it open at the same time as I'm typing. And then I'm going to go ahead and look at one of my students because I was just looking at my own portfolio. And one thing you might notice is when I look at my students, I have an extra little button up here, this little comment button. So here, I can write my own teacher comment to my student and then save that comment. Then when the student signs in, they're going to see that little blue notification. Oh, my teacher said I need to write more than hello. Okay, I'll try again. The student can then go in and edit their writing with that teacher's feedback. All right. So how's everyone doing in the chat?
Great. Looks like lots of really positive comments. Love the lesson extensions, the functionality of the pronunciation course. Yeah, cool features. People are saying they like what you're showing them.
Super cool. Okay, so we've got some more time. So I'm going to show you a couple of other neat and new things that we've made. So one of the things here is this virtual class scheduler. So we made this in March as a response to COVID and everything that was going on. But essentially here, you can add your virtual classes to a calendar, and then your students will be able to just click on that calendar. And let's see, I don't have one set up for today. But they just click on the button that says join now. So you can put in any kind of link. I'm going to open up the little instructions here in the corner. We made guides for scheduling meetings with each of these different platforms, as well as how to add them to this calendar. It's actually pretty simple. So using Zoom, they really hold your hand and take you through step by step, like go to the Zoom website, click schedule a meeting. They'll take you through every step you need to schedule the meeting, and then you're basically adding that link for your Zoom meeting to your calendar. And then when a student goes to sign in, they get a screen that will look like this, and it'll just have a button that says join now or cancel. So we made that as a way to just make things easier for students and try to remove one of those barriers that they had to joining a virtual meeting, because this way it's all in one place. So if you're using Burlington English, whether you're using Zoom or Skype or any kind of web meeting platform, you can put those links in this schedule, and then your students will be able to easily join. So they don't have to sort through, emails or texts or try to find the right link. It's all in one place. Another handy thing I'm going to show you right here is under this tutorials tile. We have been putting out new videos pretty much every week, and these are tutorials to help your students understand how to use Burlington English. So everything from how to put the app on your cell phone, to how to record words. Those tutorial videos are here. And if you decide to use them, let me know. I've got a best practices document that's going to have comprehension check questions and some things that you should do as the teacher if you're showing your students these videos to make sure that they understand what they're seeing. Okay. The next kind of just put out is under this readers section. So I think many of you know we have these digital readers that students can use. So the green are beginning level, the yellow are intermediate, and the red are advanced. So each of these readers, your students can click into. They can have the text highlight and read out loud along with the story. So I'm going to close out of that story there. There's one neat document that we just made. I swear it was last week or the week before. And it's about how to create a virtual reading room using those digital readers. So this document has a lot of different ideas and strategies for engaging your students with reading, whether it's individually or with a group, comprehension check ideas, and then it goes into some ideas for what you can do after you do reading, some writing and speaking activities that you can do along with your reading. And again, just let me know if you need that document. If you're on Burlington English, you can click on that little document in the upper toolbar to find it. But I'm happy to send it over also. Okay, another new button we added is this support tile. So if you have tech support or you need help, this is another option for you. Of course, anytime, come to me. But if you have like a bug to report or something, you can go through the support tile and it will go to our customer care team and tech support crew, so you'll get someone there to help you out. We're really, we're really here to help and support you, so we want to give you lots of different ways to get that support. Okay, the last section I will go into for today is this training tile. So I just talked to you a lot about Burlington Core. And as we know, you don't learn something in 1 hour. So if you would like to learn more about Core specifically and how to teach with it, there are 2 webinars that you can take that are under this training tile. So to get to them, you're going to click on this virtual training. These are live webinars that happen every week at different times to meet different schedules. So the first one is on how to teach virtually with Burlington Core. So again, made directly in response to COVID. It'll tell you how to teach from a distance using our core curriculum. And then the second one is how to give your students an orientation to Core. So basically everything you need to know to give your students a strong orientation, whether it's in person or at a distance. These are each 75 minutes long. You get a certificate at the end of each one, and they'll also follow up and send you some other materials that might be helpful. Like, for example, if you attend this one on getting students started with Burlington Core, they'll give you things like a training checklist to make sure you're covering all of the parts of Core that you need to with your students. Some of those best practices for using our tutorial videos, lots and lots of different info that you can get from both of these, and those are led by Burlington trainers in other parts of the country. So you get to kind of also interact with teachers in other states and see what they're doing, which I think can also really help enhance teaching. All right. So we're at 4:07. So we'll stop here and just take time. If anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or type in the chat. All right, and if there are no questions, we'll just finish out a couple minutes early. That's fine too. I think I saw Angela chatted my email address right earlier. Yep, so feel free to email me. I can also put in, let's see, my phone number. I just need to remember what it is. I had it written down on a Post-it, but of course I never call myself.
I'll go grab it.
Angela, you probably will be quicker with it than me, really. Oh, so silly. Yeah, thanks so much, Andrew. And then Eric is asking about getting a recording. I think, Kim, you said it was on, is it on the conference page?
The recordings will be on the conference page, yeah. It doesn't happen
Perfect.
immediately because it takes a long time to convert them.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Overnight.
Yeah, it sounds like, yeah, definitely. Thanks so much, guys. And feel free to reach out. My whole job is support teachers using this program. So I would much rather work one-on-one with you and plan out a lesson or support your class than I would look at a spreadsheet. So anytime, reach out to me.
Thank you, JennaRose.
Thanks, Carla. Yeah, good to see you all. Angela, thanks for putting my cell phone number in there. So that is my work cell phone. You can also text that number because it's a cell phone. So you can call, text, or email me for help with Burlington.
Thank you very much. Everyone have a good day.